Hello, hello. Alright. Anyway, I feel like the main problem we have is false perceptions is that right now I feel like African American people within America, we're in a trap that's it's not physical, it's more psychological than anything. And with all the many false perceptions we have portrayed in the media, I feel like black people are really more taken in their extremes than in their more subtle natures. And I feel like a lot of that it descends back in time, because like the last real major movement that you saw, like when everybody was coalescing together, was during the time, like there was two groups. It was Black Panthers, and there was another group that I can't remember the name of, but they were more politically oriented. And after that, those two groups fell through. There was never really a major push for black culture, black heritage, and then that's when the gangs started forming. That's when we had like the Bloods and the Crips. And I feel like within African American society, because again, outside the culture, people only have what they take on face value. And I feel like the story within the society is much deeper because, when we had these gangs first come up, I feel like it was more just, it was much less, it wasn't just only, like the need to like claim something, whether it was a block, a territory, area, city, it was, like just to have something that stood out amongst everything else. Like Crips was originally Community Resistance and Progress, or Community Reformation and Progress. It was one of those two. And that was, you can see, like, that's how it really started, like the black people wanted to have their own society, their own culture, and protect that from outside force. And I feel like with, the harsh conditions people were placed in, it was taking a lot of way out of hand. And now we basically have, at least within the city, we have two divisions of African American society where we have you have the more street ghetto kids, which is more like they're following just another rule. It's all in protest against the system, but it's like this is the only way that these kids really know how to do it, because they don't follow the way. They don't see the point in following the same pattern as everybody else, because even within the education system, there's many different cultural programs and twists that, it really dumbs down the black, the African American race, because it takes a lot of power away from who we are and places us into more what they want us to be. So how do y'all feel y'all want to address these problems, or this question, or whatever? What do you think?
Come on, man. It's such a broad question. I'm going to let the mirage up.
That is a broad question. I'll try to answer the bits and pieces that I can mentally take note of. But on the first end, right, I kind of want to acknowledge history. You said that whole idea of being black and proud and having black progress was something that more or less ended with the civil rights movement, more or less.
That was like the last music press.
Okay, and we don't really have much now, but the thing is, though, I think we kind of got to realize what happened, right? I mean, we did once we get the Civil Rights Act passed. Once black folks start getting jobs, because prior to the Civil Rights Movement, most black folks worked in domestic service and agricultural work as sharecroppers. So we have the vast majority of black folks working in a service industry. Essentially to be subservient. Vast majority, right? So then in the 60s, black folks start getting access to public employment. So you have a large drive in the military, you have a large drive in public servants, and those jobs usually have a lot more stability than the private sector. But we're only one generation removed from the civil rights movement. That momentum that you say stopped, we have to realize that Medgar Evers, Martin Luther King, Fred Hampton, Marcus Garvey was more or less, he couldn't come back to the States. that's another issue, that's a whole other issue. I studied Martin. Anyway, the point that I'm making, right, is we have a large number of black leaders assassinated, killed, right, removed. And once you kill leaders of movements, well, it's really hard for that movement to progress. And then once people get appropriations, political appropriations, they get more or less satisfied. Because that was the stopping point, that was the desire, that was the drive in the movement Because goals weren't able to be redefined, that's when the movement stopped. And I think right now we're in a position, and I think about this a lot, I talk about it a lot, especially in my class, is that by 2050, the estimated majority of the United States is going to be people of color. In 2012, for the first time in American history, most new births were people of color. So if that rate continues, well, we have a large majority to back any type of a movement, a political movement, when we try to get political appropriations for equality for the first time in history in America. I mean, that's kind of a big deal. Then we have international realities, right, with, let's say, the East African commerce. If they're able to develop their own commercial industries and nationalize some of these public resources, then that puts black power in a sense where Kwame Nkrumah desired it to be from these beginning Pan-Africanist movements. And things like this are happening all over the world, right? People are beginning to take ownership of their own enterprise. And that's going to be social, material, and political. And that's really important, right? I think if black folks are able to see beyond themselves and their current conditions and align with black folks internationally, because, I mean, this connection between Africa, the Caribbean, and the U.S. has always been there, right? If we're able to realize some of these connections, at least metaphysically, and say we are one, then we're able to cling to something that has some sense of power. And then on another end, when we get things like YouTube, where people are really able for the first time in a long time to reach mass audiences by self-produced image. Like I can get on YouTube and talk for like 30 minutes and I can at least get like 40 people to like whatever I got to say, right? I mean, that's a new phenomenon. And we are put in a position to redefine our image outside of what's commercially acceptable. Because what's commercially acceptable is going to be what's stereotypical. What's commercial, I mean, I remember I watched Batman, what was it, the Dark Knight, and I was lightly upset because like every brother except for Morgan Freeman got just offed. Like, ooh, we want to see this magic trick. Like, really? But I can understand why Morgan Freeman didn't get off because like he played God like maybe a year before, so we can't kill God. The point is though is that this idea of black power, that was something that we got on our podium, we got on these pedestals, we preached about it, we made movements behind it, we wanted black power, we wanted something to claim for ourselves. Now we actually have the ability to reinvigorate that movement that stopped. And one last note that I want to leave with, the last great terrain that the Black Power movement created was African American Studies. Most programs were founded in 1968 and they were founded by student activism. The point that I want to make is that if you want to make a statement at this university and beyond, we have to pull into institutions that serve the needs of black folks and other folks who are marginalized in society. If you guys want to make a point on this campus to address some of these social political needs on this campus, make Africana Studies accountable. Because ultimately we would have to answer any call that the students make. That is our job, and that is what we are supposed to do. So if you're talking about how do we make change, well, take the initiative. I mean, I think, and I'm not saying that nobody is. I'm saying that ultimately it starts with somebody saying, "Yo, I got something to say. This needs to change, and I'm holding you accountable." I mean, that's where it starts. I mean, because ultimately we got a voice that can't be denied one way or another. It's just we need to find a platform to make sure that somebody has to listen.